restores balance with their scientifically formulated blend with magnesium that fights fatigue and boosts endurance. It has natural ingredients made with real fruit extracts and no artificial colors or flavors because your body deserves the best. It has delicious flavors like mixed fruit and watermelon that keep you revitalized and ready for action. It will boost your performance with essential vitamins and minerals. Magnet fuels your workouts, helping you crush your goals. Join the Magnet movement whether you're training, competing, or simply staying active. Magnet is your go-to refreshment for peak performance. You can order it now on our direct link at drinkmagnet.com. Also, use promo code Cris and Mall to get $5 off your purchase. So don't wait. Again, that promo code is Cris and Mall to get $5 off your purchase. Get Magnet, push your limits, fuel your passion.
Okay, everybody, we have a special guest on today. We got Michael Cooper of the Scarlet Standard Media.
What's up, guys? How are you guys doing?
Pretty good. And you, sir?
What's going on, man?
Appreciate you coming on the show, man, and talk some UNLV football and some other things about UNLV. Before we get into all that, man, tell everybody how you got started doing your Scarlet Standard Media and how long you been doing it.
So I've been doing Scarlet Standard since April. I'm a UNLV alumni, and I've been around UNLV since basically I was a kid. It was ironic. I used to have a pretty decent following. Well, maybe not, follower wise, but like a pretty decent following of like people that read my stuff about UNLV that I used to post on Twitter. And ironically, former Rebel Mike Moser, who's now a coach for the Houston Rockets, he messaged me on Instagram and was like, he really likes my writing. And he's like, you should get it out there. And if this is something that you want to do. And I just took that and kind of ran with it. It's been a whirlwind since April, if I'm being honest. It's, I got my first media credential for football on Saturday. So it went from just being in a kind of an independent kind of platform that I have that now I'm actually, I write about UNLV and UNLV only. I have connections within, the program. I talk to a lot of people. So I try to get as much information out as possible. You guys may know that Vegas media doesn't really cover UNLV that much. And so I'm trying to build a platform that is strictly about UNLV and UNLV only. If you guys have seen my page a little bit, it's Scarlet Standard Media on Instagram. I also have a Substack underneath the Scarlet Standard. All my writing goes on Substack. I post my player interviews and things like that there as well, and as well as on YouTube. But yeah, it's I've gotten to meet a lot of players so far in the off season. It's been very interesting to see. Saturday was a very interesting game that could have been a disaster waiting to happen.
Yeah.
But, I think that it comes with the territory that this program, is under, unusual national media attention. And, they've wanted that attention for years. They're finally getting it.
Right.
And I think that, that comes with, other, social media was not very fun for UNLV fans. I was reading through it, and it, that's just something they're going to have to get used to. I think it's, it comes with the territory. You guys, a lot of UNLV fans wanted to be the big dog, the big man in the Mountain West. And now you got it. Now you're paying $3.5 million for a coach. And that comes with the consequences and criticism when you barely beat an FCS school in week 0. So
yeah. Well, right, staying right there, we're going from Coach Barry Odom, and he set a culture here, and it was, the UNLV football program was rising, and now we go to Dan Mullen, who's probably has a little bit higher prestige, being in the SEC, coaching at Florida, Mississippi State, What kind of culture do you see so far? I know it's early, but what kind of culture do you see so far that Dan Mullins is setting in UNLV football right now?
I think you're starting to. He's been very adamant that he's trying to push what Barry has built. Him and Barry were friends. Barry was one of the reasons why he got to see UNLV's facilities for the first time.
Okay.
So it is, I think, and you're not going to completely, in perspective, tear down a culture of a school that is coming off back-to-back bowl appearances. They're, which was the first time in program history. You're not going to, tear down the foundation that's already built. You're going to continue to thrive and grow on that. And like you mentioned, from the SEC pedigree, Barry had that SEC pedigree also coming from Missouri. So if you look at it from that perspective, you're just going to continue to grow and build bringing in those SEC level type of athletes. I mean, if you think about even just the quarterback room that he got, you had a transfer from Michigan who was a starter at one point for Michigan last season, and you have Calandria who is he started 17 games of the 21 he played in at Virginia in the ACC. So you can start to see that it's, the investment wise that the athletic program is doing, the what do you call it? The the backing of what the AD and what they're trying to build. I mean, they have the facilities, they have the culture. Now it's just continuing to, the jump that they need to make is finally getting over that hurdle of winning the Mountain West Championship. And they have the talent to do so. I mean, if you look at their roster up and down, they had 33 transfers from Power 4 schools. So, then they had 17 of those, which were former 4- or 5-star recruits.
Mm-hmm.
So they're starting to flow the talent. He's using the relationships that he had, because some of these guys he recruited when he was at Florida. The last years he was at Florida. So he's using his connections. He's brought in a pretty good staff. I mean, the offense looked fine. Paul Gunther is Paul Gunther. So he has his, NFL issues, and he has his, college. He had his college issues, but it also could be, I don't think that they, a lot of these guys that came in they're just waiting for their chance.
Right.
And, sometimes when you're on your second or third school and you still haven't, I'll use a lot of gripe came on Jake Pope, the safety transfer from Alabama and Georgia. Well, he didn't play much when he was at Alabama and Georgia. So, he played 70 snaps on Saturday. So it's kind of like, his first real game action. It's also, FCS, but I think culture-wise, it's going to continue to grow, continue to build, and they want to win. And I think, their goal is ultimately, I mean, it's every G5, G6's goal it's to go to a Power 4. And, what Power 4 doesn't want a, Allegiant Stadium, the facilities that UNLV has, they just need to continue to win. Yeah. And winning solves a lot of those issues. Basketball needs, pass with, even just if you look at since Eric Harper has been there, he's hired 3 coaches. He hired Barry Odom. He's hired Josh Pastner, which is still a wait and see on the basketball side. And he got Dan Mullen. So you can see that there's, it's coming. It's just a matter of when. And, I think if you see if you see them regress again on Friday night when they play San Houston State, you'll see what the true buy-in of these players are, because Sam Houston State's a game they should win. Right. I mean, and everybody's looking forward to 2 weeks from now.
Yeah, UCLA game, right?
So it's just gonna be a matter of, we'll see the true culture and what he's trying to build. I mean, it's gonna take time. Some of these guys came in, late in spring ball. Some of these guys came in. I think you could see that, the foundation's starting to be set. It's a matter of getting these guys to buy in. I mean, I know Mullen's teams he loves the celebration. He loves the hype on the sideline, but they had some very, very unnecessary penalties that kept drives going. Mm-hmm. And you may be able to get away with that against Idaho State, but you can't get away with that against, D1 schools, let alone schools like UCLA.
Right. You got anything more?
Yeah, man. First of all, hey, Mike, appreciate you coming on, bro. Congrats on that credential too, my brother. Hey, congrats on that for sure. Man, let's break the ice, man. Let's get into this game that we saw on Saturday, man. That first quarter looked horrendous. I'm not gonna cap. You know what I mean? The QB play looked kind of inconsistent. I think our running game looked pretty fantastic. But our defense, I think that's been one of the keys, especially like with last year. We couldn't stop nobody. And I know it's still early in the season. I know everybody's still kind of, getting their gearings together and trying to find that cohesiveness on that defensive side. As you stated, a lot of these guys just came late in spring. What's kind of like the overall feel with this defense, man? We kind of saw a lot of plays where the communication was kind of off. You know, play action looked like they played horrible against the play action in certain aspects of the game.
Well, I think one thing that killed them is watching that game. You know, I've watched it back as well. It's how many times did the running back Dacian Brooks for Idaho State just get pop off 10, 12 yards on a delayed handoff or delayed draw? It seemed like, you know, the pass rush was the major problem. You know, looking back, you know, breaking down the box score and looking back, it's they didn't get very much. They only had 1 sack against an FCS school. They only had 4 quarterback hurries all night. So if you're not getting that type of pressure, no matter how good your corners are, if you're going to sit back, because they looked like they just sat back in soft zone coverage most of the night. And, you know, on those 3rd and 5s, 3rd and 4s, they were, you know, 10 yards off the line. So, I mean, you can't play that. And if the way that I think, you know, it could be, you know, they played a very vanilla game plan, which they easily could have, and they could have very underestimated their opponent. Or, you know, they also had 2 starting defensive players out. So you may have thrown somebody in who, you know, Mumu Binwad, he was expected to be a very big contributor in the secondary, and he wasn't dressed. So you may have been throwing a guy who maybe not have been ready to go, or maybe been a last minute scratch. So communication could be off. You could tell that communication was off all night in the secondary. I mean, just take that, like you said, that first quarter, take that trick play. I mean, that was just a blown coverage. You had in the third quarter, you had a 3rd and long. You had it was like 3rd and 16, 3rd and 17, and you know the guy scrambles out, gets hit, and it's a blown coverage across the middle of the field that leads to a over 40-yard touchdown. So I think I also don't know if Paul Gunther is the interim DC. He took over late in spring as well when they were in the middle of install when Zach Arnett resigned and ended up at Florida State. So I don't know if that could be an issue as well. You know, you're still going to a culture change. Arnett was installing it one way. You know, Gunther may be installing it another way. You know, it's football. You're gonna have to adjust on the fly no matter what. But at the end of the day, I think you can't give up 380 yards passing and 550 yards of offense to any school and expect to win games and expect to, especially for the height that they were getting, expect to be a CFP contender. It's not going to happen. So I think, you know, I wrote a little bit about what they needed to clean up, and it's very interesting of what they do need to clean up. It's, you know, offensive line play was terrible. I mean, Calandra looked like he was running for his life all night long, and I was looking back at like some PFF grades and things like that, and they only had, you know, they had 3 of the 6 linemen that rotated in and played. They had 3 rank in the bottom 5 in the nation of you know, how they performed. So obviously that needs to be cleaned up. And I think, you know, the Calandra had a bunch of deke and dunks and, you know, swing passes and short routes. They didn't really open up the offense. I mean, Jaden Bradley played great. You know, he had 6 catches for 143 yards, but everybody else was, you know, where was JoJo Earl? Where was you know, Troy Amorie? Where was even the tight ends and Elkins and Varkey's Gums? Like, maybe they didn't want to show much, but you know, they really didn't. I mean, Calandra had he dropped back 24 times and he was pressured 8 of them and was sacked 3. That doesn't count how many times he ran the ball. You know, so it's, and I think the other thing they need to clean up on the offensive side is they need to get Jet. They need to figure out who's going to play and what they're going to do with Jet. You know, Jet played 32 snaps, Glover played 20, and Kayvon Lee played 17. I mean, granted, giving Jet only 10 carries on 32 snaps is, you know, out is crazy to me, especially with how well he was playing. But you know, the 2 other running backs in Lee and Glover combined for 12 carries for 33 yards. You can't have that. You know, Jet's going to need a blow at some point,
right?
And you're going to need a change of pace. And if you're not able to open up the game and through the air, it just can't be Calandra running for his life or them trying to use Orgy and special packages, you know, the way that they did. Granted, I will say on the quarterbacks, if Orgy doesn't fumble on the goal line to open the game, we may see a more even distribution of what that rotation was.
Right.
Okay.
Because I thought Orji looked great on that first drive. I thought, other than the fumble, but Glandry played well. He had over 100 yards rushing, or he had 93 yards rushing and 195 yards passing, and I think it's going to be very interesting. But the defense is my worry. It was my worry all offseason. When you have guys that are coming in, either on their they were very, a lot of the interviews I did with players, they talked about how tight-knit the group was, how close, how bonded they were. But, that may be great for off the field. And it's nothing against them. That may be great for off the field, getting to know each other chemistry, but it really didn't show on the field. Yeah. So it's gonna be very interesting. Like, what does he do snap-wise? Is he going to continue to rotate guys in, or is he going to, ride his better players really and see what happens, see where it goes? Because they opened as a 13.5-point favorite against Sam Houston. That line was, after the Idaho State game, that line was dropped to 10, which I still think is a pretty bettable line. But you're getting respect. You're a 10-point favorite on the road. That's impressive no matter what school you are. So absolutely. you got to live up to the hype and expectation that everybody's giving you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure. Question: do you think the program is doing enough to build a stronger connection with the Las Vegas community?
I think they are correcting that. I think that you had coaches. Barry was a very good coach. He was not a personable, personality per se. Kevin Kruger struggled to get fans in the stands because he didn't win games, and he was not a very personable personality. When you're a head coach at any athletic program at UNLV, you have to be a showman. That's part of your job. You're in Vegas, and I think you see that with how much Pastner has been in the community, how much he's pushing for people to get back to the stands, his players being out there talking to people. Even with Mullen's been everywhere. He's in commercials. He's talking to people. He's, he thanked the UNLV fans for coming out on Saturday and hopes that they fill in Allegiant Stadium for UCLA. So I think that, they're taking a complete different narrative and a complete different direction. I think they're going under the microscope of, what did we do wrong? Granted, success was good with football, and that winning got people in the stands. But what did we do wrong from a marketing perspective to get people's butts in the seats? And I think that, even doing little things like keeping their radio show at Parkway Tavern, not moving it. The whiskey bar across the street from the stadium has a Dan Mullen menu that does a Dan Mullen eating challenge. Doing things like that, trying to, engage that way is great, I think. And, this is what they're doing. And, Mullen only has been here since December and, one game, and Pastner hasn't coached a game yet. Winning cures all, but, they know that if they don't win and they don't have those type of personalities, they're going to be second, third fiddle behind VGK, behind the Raiders. And, with baseball coming also, you may be third, fourth fiddle. You're already technically, as much as I hate to say it, you're already second fiddle in your own stadium that you play in. Yeah. So what can you do to be successful to get people in for your games? Because, they announced attendance was 25,000 for, an FCS game, which was rescheduled on short notice. So, which was still a pretty decent crowd, but they're expecting to get, 50,000 plus against UCLA. It's the first time that they're selling the third deck at Allegiant Stadium. So it's you saw the attendance rise last year. Winning does that, but it's going to be, they got to market better. They got to get more. Even if you notice the little things, what they did in the back of the end zone, they put those bleachers in to move students down to the field. Mm-hmm. Granted, I don't know why they just don't work something out with the Raiders to just pull those stands out, but at least they're doing something. The band's on the field, those seats for students, first 500 students can get field access basically in the end zone. And, if you fill that up and you mix that with a full stadium, that makes a good impact. So, they got it. They got the biggest thing I think is connecting with the city, winning, and getting students to go. It's the student section hasn't been very prevalent since they had the Chem Kong in the rebellion when UNLV was making the NCAA tournament every year. So
Right.
it's trying to build that back, build a relationship, and just be able to get Allegiant should be full. If they win, Allegiant should be minimum 30,000-40,000 every night. There shouldn't be an excuse for it.
Yeah.
No, we definitely saw it last year with the success the team had. I got a question. What's your kind of thoughts as far as like the whole overall Mountain West Conference? There's been a lot of discussions, with teams leaving, teams coming. Obviously, there was a little discussions about maybe possibly UNLV moving out. What do you think the future of the Mountain West is going like these next 5-10 years?
I think people schools made their decisions to go for whatever the reasons were.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously I've written a bunch about how UNLV's decision to stay in the Mountain West was a financial decision. It wasn't a a performance decision. They took a short-term route to fix their budget, in my opinion, to be the class of a conference per se. And at the end of the day, I think that if the Pac-12 does not get their autonomous status and they're not considered part of a Power 5 conference, it doesn't really matter at this point with how CFP realignment talk has changed. If it's, Big 10, Big 12, or I'm sorry, Big 10, SEC, and then, the Big 12 gets their one or two bids, it doesn't really matter because the G5 is going to be, a G5, whether it has 1 spot, 2 spots, 3 spots. And if UNLV can continue its success, they're going to have to schedule better non-conference games, which you've already potentially started to see that happen with them removing games against, UTSA and schools like that to schedule better games. Those games are obviously have not been announced of what they are or what they look like, but they're already in the process of removing future games with schools and rescheduling so they can get better competition. I think that if it's going to be Boise and UNLV, if the success continues, and it's going to be that conversation. And if it's going to be, they take 2 schools from the G5, it'll probably be those 2 if they can win. I think where it hurts them is the basketball perspective. Granted, you can take you can look at the Mountain West, the new Mountain West. Grand Canyon's a very good basketball program. They're very underrated. They've made the NCAA tournament for the last 5 seasons. They're a very underrated basketball program. They travel well. New Mexico has been a very consistent basketball program. Reno has been a very consistent basketball program. Then you have UNLV, who's trying to get back, to where they were. You don't even have to say the TARC days. It's just making that consistent NCAA tournament every year. That's
Right.
where that's the level they need to get to. I mean, but if you look at it, let's just say the Pac-12, Boise State's a good basketball program. Colorado State's a good basketball program. There's been talks that they're trying to get St. Mary's. So St. Mary's, is good. Gonzaga's obviously Gonzaga. San Diego State's been, they were a national runner-up 2 years ago. Like the Pac-12 is going to be a very, very, very good basketball conference. Football-wise, it could just be Boise and everybody else. It depends on what these other schools do. How, a lot of schools now are in debt. It's, a big thing across the country, whether, it's Iowa State, it's Ohio State, it's UNLV. There are schools, because they're funding NIL and these, travel, playing better schools, try to get where they're at. They're financially, in debt. So, but then you have schools like San Diego State, who's, they're not spending heavily on NIL. Does that work when you go to try to compete in a conference like that? Because I could easily go to Gonzaga instead and play in the same conference as you and have a consistent, national Sweet 16 every year or, things like that. So it's going to be very interesting. I think I do think the thing to watch is this year's Mountain West basketball, because you have Grand Canyon coming in a year early. So you have already, and they're playing the Mountain West 5 who are leaving, and just the intensity and the venues and the atmosphere in those games is going to be heated. It's going to be, there's going to be a lot of hate. And, what people don't realize as well is like, even on the football side, there's a lot of rivalries that are going away. UNLV and Boise starting to turn into a budding rivalry. If UNLV can get over the hump and beat them, you can call it a rivalry.
Right.
Colorado State is not going to play Wyoming anymore. The border war is gone. And then Air Force and Colorado State, that rivalry game is on pause as well. So you're losing a lot of those good, smaller rivalries that people don't talk about. UNLV and Reno is staying, obviously. But, New Mexico and San Diego State, they started a pretty good budding rivalry in basketball. That's gone unless they schedule them non-conference wise. So I think people look at it from the big picture, but if you look at it inside, like you're losing a lot of different little rivalries that you wouldn't think were there. But, those fan bases sometimes don't like each other. And those are going to create, it's going to be very interesting, I think.
Yeah, for sure. Last question before I get you up out of here, man. What is your overall feeling of the of the UNLV football team? What is your expectations? Where do you think they finish as far as the conference goes?
Before I saw week 1 or game 1, I had them going 10-2, finishing second in the Mountain West and beating Boise in Boise for the Mountain West Championship. I think that, the smaller games that I was worried about preseason wise, which were Colorado State and Wyoming, I've been very adamant on my platform that, those are the 2 games that could make or break their season. In my opinion, they haven't won at Wyoming since 2002. They haven't won at Colorado State since 2003. So, when you have those demons still that you're trying to get rid of, they still linger, they still hang around the program. I still think, I still think that they can finish, 9-10 wins. But it's going to be Friday night's going to be very telling. How do you bounce back off of a poor performance? How do you bounce back off, being basically criticized by every, football page out there? I mean, how many times have I seen, in my opinion, on like some of these just like college football U pages and things like that, they've just called Dan Mullen ass, or the UNLV football team a terrible, or people making that, this was your CFP prediction. Like, do they read too much into that? Is this game, was the trap game Idaho State, or is this still a trap game because they have UCLA coming up? What is the focus like? And like you mentioned in the beginning, the culture. What is that culture being instilled? What's the focus like? What's it look like? How do you bounce back from the adversity? I think if they have a good bounce back game Friday night, I'm going to stick with my prediction. 10 wins, they make the Mountain West Championship and win it, because their back half of their schedule is very weak. They have New Mexico at home, they have Reno on the road, they have Utah State at home. Like, if they can get through the first 3 or 4 weeks and they can come out healthy, and they can be 4-1, basically, like, they can make a run, I think. But it's Friday night's going to be very telling, in my opinion.
Yeah, for sure. One more question. How special do you think Jaden Thomas can be?
I've been on the train since Mullen was hired that he is going to be this year's Ashton Genty.
Okay.
And I think that if you looked at that run that he broke for 70 yards, it was very Ashton Genty-like. And I think if they win, 10 or 11 games, they were ranked. I mean, I don't know what the new AP poll dropped. I'm sure that they dropped them from, getting some votes, but they were 35 to open the season. If they take care of business against Sam Houston, some teams fall this weekend, week 1, they're up to 26, 27. They get it. If he goes nuts against UCLA, national attention on that game,
right?
Because, a lot of eyes are going to be on that just because of Nico.
Mm-hmm.
But, it could turn into what can Jaden Thomas, when I did my interview with him, he said that his goal for 2025 was to be a household name. He wants people to remember his name.
Okay.
And I think, if they're ranked and, they beat Boise on the road, they beat UCLA, they're sitting there at 11-1, and he rushes for, I'm not going to say he's going to rush for 2,600 yards. That's probably won't happen again. But he's sitting there around 1,800, 15, 16, 1,700 yards. They're nationally. I don't see why he can't be sitting there as part of talk, at least.
Right.
And I think, it was kind of a slap in the face to him that he wasn't Mountain West preseason player of the year. No disrespect to Maddox Madsen, but Maddox Madsen was very protected by Ashton Genty. And Jaden Thomas had the body of work to be, be considered in that. And he was my preseason pick for Mount West Player of the Year, and I think he could be sitting there in the talks like they were having with about Ashton Jeanty last year.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, the kid, he went off.
What is your opinion? What do you think? Where do you think he can stand?
I think I'm with you. I think that he can be this year's Genty because the kid is special. I mean, 3 touchdowns. We had like 187 yards on
147, 3 touchdowns.
Yeah, so my man went off, and he was most of the offense on Saturday. So yeah, and he was already special before that. You saw the flashes even before that. It was just him getting more opportunities. So I think this year he's gonna go off. I think he could possibly be they could be at the end of the year, they could be looking at him as like a top 100 pick type deal with him. So
I think you can see like they're going to use him a lot in the passing game as well, and that's going to be a very underutilized part of his game, or underappreciated part of his game. And like you mentioned, if he could be a top 100, that could turn him into a higher level draft pick just strictly because he can show he can run, he can catch. His blocking was highly graded as well, so
that's a good thing.
And keep in mind, he's only a junior.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
If he doesn't, if he pops off the way he does, and Mullen gets him to come back either not transfer to a higher level school or go to the NFL, what does his senior year look like?
Yeah, for sure. Well, Michael, man, I appreciate you coming on the show, man, giving us some insight on UNLV football and UNLV as a whole, man. We'll definitely be looking out for more information from you, man, and definitely excited for the season. Even though it's week 0, I always take it as guys are still trying to get their footing. They're still trying to get their play. It's a whole new team of players coming together, and I say by mid-season we'll get a real good identity.
I will say. It felt like watching that game in person, you were at an open scrimmage that just happened to have 25,000 fans there.
Yeah. That's a good description. That's a really good description.
Yeah, for sure. So tell everybody where to follow you at, where they can get all the information from.
Absolutely. So I'm a lot of my content's on Substack. So substack.com at Scarlet Standard Media. You can also follow me on Twitter at SS_media LV and on Twitter at Scarlet Standard Media. I try to get content out, as much as I can, whether it's player videos, interviews, things like that. And, I have almost daily written content. So like, subscribe, and follow me for any UNLV news and interviews that you'd be looking for.
All right, Michael, man, appreciate you coming on, man. Definitely got to bring you back on probably mid-season to get your opinion on everything.
Absolutely. Thank you guys for having me.
All right,
appreciate you, brother.
All right, man. Shout out to Michael Cooper, man, for giving us some insight, man. Definitely good to have somebody connected to the team, man, to give us a little bit more, in-depth insight, background, the behind-the-scenes stuff, man.
Right.
And it's dope that he's credentialed now, so he's really close to the team and stuff like that.
Yeah, congratulations to that. Yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see what happens Friday night. Like that performance did leave a lot of eyebrows raised.